as it happened, the New York Association, and it's like, I actually, and this is like, we had our Black Journalists Association in the Bay Area, and we were going around trying to figure out what to get a lawyer, but the only lawyers we knew were criminal lawyers, and we're talking about different kind of issues here. But as it turned out, the New York Association of Black Journalists calls and said, "We got a lawyer for you, Caldwell, a constitutional lawyer," which didn't even mean anything to me at that time. And he's out there in California. He's at Stanford University. Well, I go to my Black Journalists Association. They say, "Well, who is he?" I said, "I don't know." The New York people say, "Is he black?" "No, he's white." "How do we know he's representing us? He might be a government." We didn't know anything. But as it happened, Black Americans have long been constitutional experts, advocates, because we've had to fight for everything in the Constitution. All other people, they just go through their lives knowing they have these constitutional rights. Black people had to fight for it. We had to fight take these fights to the Supreme Court, for education, for so many things. But as it happened at that time, there was this extraordinary, very young fellow whose name was Anthony Amsterdam. And he was known as this foremost constitutional lawyer fighting against the death penalty. And he was at Stanford University. Finally, late in the night, on the night before I had to go before the grand jury, we go down to his house in Los Altos, California. Myself and about 4 members from the Black Journalists Association in the San Francisco Bay Area. There was Rush Greenlee, who is now dead. Bob Allen, who is now a tenured professor at the University of California, Berkeley. Will Jones, who is a journalist yet. I think he's practiced. I think he runs a paper down somewhere in the Caribbean. So we go down there and we find this guy. We get to his house. It was after midnight. And I'll never forget, he got him out of bed. His wife got up and made a pot of coffee. And this guy says, and we go in and we're trying to start to tell him about the case. And I'm saying, and we're saying, and we're not going to do it. We have to be the grand jury tomorrow. We're not going to do it. And the Black Journalists Association, their idea was for me just to go in there and tell the court, I'm not going to do it. And then I would go to jail. And there was no end for the story. I was just like, Earl, you go to jail and stay there. I didn't like that story. I didn't like that strategy. That wasn't even a strategy. I'm not going to do it as just defiance. And that will just get you thrown in jail. This guy talked to us. I'll bet it wasn't 10 minutes. And he said, I've already studied the case in his conversations with the people from New York. He said, I've studied the case. And I've concluded that you have a legal right to refuse. Those words, they hit me like you wouldn't believe, because that's something you could get a hold of. A legal right to refuse. A legal right to refuse. The lawyer over there for the New York Times told me, bring your stuff in. Some of it should go to the... Whew. And then he said something else. We had a meeting the next morning at this law firm, the New York Times. They had an executive vice president of the newspaper had flown out. There was a big story about that. He's flying to California to oversee the Caldwell defense. So I called his hotel. And I knew where he was staying because we were supposed to have dinner that night, and I begged off because I had to go with these black journalists, but I couldn't tell anybody where. We wound up going down to see Amsterdam. So I knew his hotel was, and I called his hotel because Amsterdam told me, he said, in that meeting tomorrow, don't you show up. I said, but we got to have that meeting, then we got to go right to the grand jury. He said, you don't go. I'll go. I'm representing you. You don't go. I sit thinking like, geez, when my boss sees something I can't do, I'll lose my job. I called up his hotel. I got his wake-up call. Well, I found out what time his wake-up call was. I called him certain days after. I said, listen, the subpoenas aimed against me as an individual. I said, I have a lawyer, and the lawyer's going to be there tomorrow morning. He told me not to be there. He said, I understand. But he told me to come an hour later, so I'll be over there.